We will start in exactly a minute. It will be an intervention from Dr. Hussein Hajj Hassan, and then we will leave some time for any questions or interventions. We welcome all the attendees, all the organizations and groups that support the struggle of the Palestinian people. This political and theoretical series started by Masar Badil movement continues. This is the second conference from the series with the leaders of the resistance in Lebanon. We had hosted our dear brother, Dr. Sayed Ammar Musawi, head of Arab and International Relations in Hezbollah. And today we have a very dear guest who's very dear for our people and our resistance. We try to sum up his biography in order to win some time, even though his biography is very long, but it's important to present this biography of Dr. Hussein Hajj Hassan. Our guest was born in the town of Nabishit in 1960. He's married with 4 children and 2 brothers, Muhammad and Ahmad Hajj Hassan, were martyred in the Islamic resistance. He completed his primary education in several schools and his secondary education at the Ghubayri Public Secondary School. And, our dear guest holds a bachelor's degree in chemistry from the Faculty of Sciences of the Lebanese University in 1981. He also holds a master's degree in chemistry and physical physics from the University of Strasbourg in France. And he holds a French state doctorate in chemistry and physical physics from the University of Orléans in France in 1987 with highest honors. He participated in numerous scientific conferences and published several research papers in chemistry and physical physics. He worked in the field of Islamic outreach among French and Arab communities in France. And he is one of the founders of the Islamic Union of Lebanese Students in France. He's a professor at the Lebanese University in the faculties of Sciences, Medicine, Dentistry, and Pharmacy since 1987. He participated in confronting the Israeli invasion of Lebanon in 1982 in Beirut. He joined the Islamic resistance at its inception and became a member of Hezbollah upon its organizational formation. Upon returning to Lebanon in 1987, he participated in founding the Consultative Center for Studies and Documentation and was appointed as director in 1988. It's one of the most important research centers in Lebanon. He held several responsibilities within Hezbollah, most recently head of educational mobilization since 1991, and he was elected member of parliament for the Bekaa region in all parliamentary terms since 1996 to 2026. And he's the head of the Baalbek and Hermel parliamentary bloc since 2018. Our dear guest has also held numerous ministerial posts and different governments. He was the chairman of the Parliamentary Committee on Agriculture and Tourism in the 2000 term. He was member of the Parliamentary Committee on Public Works and Transport in several terms, most recently in 2022. And he was appointed member of the Parliamentary Committee on Finance and Budget in 2005 term. He was appointed Minister of Agriculture in the government of Prime Minister Saad al-Hariri in 2009, and he was appointed Minister of Agriculture in the government of Prime Minister Najib Mikati in 2011. And he was appointed Minister of Industry in the government of Prime Minister Tamam Salam in 2014, and appointed Minister of Industry in the government of Prime Minister Saad al-Hariri in 2016, and Chairman of the Parliamentary Committee on Media and Telecommunications in the 2018 term. And he's currently a member of the Parliamentary Committee on Administration and Justice. This biography that we summed up expresses multiple issues, but it also says that our guests can ask whatever questions they might have on the Lebanese reality because our guest has this very wide uh, and vast experience, and he's aware of not just the experience of the resistance in Lebanon, but he's also one of the voices that's able to express the current reality in Lebanon and the region and the resistance. Through Dr. Hassan and in your name, we want to offer our condolences to a number of martyrs targeted by the Zionist enemy, including many resistance leaders and civilians. This enemy continues in its assault on Lebanon. It also committed a massacre. It had committed a massacre in Al Halwi camp last November and yesterday as well. Yesterday, two martyrs ascended in Al Halwi camp. Therefore, Lebanon is subjected to a daily Zionist aggression, and our guests will undoubtedly give us developments or explain the situation regarding these developments. But first, he will be talking about the reality of the prisoners and the Lebanese prisoners in the Zionist occupation prisons, especially given the fact that our guest has done a number of meetings, popular and political meetings related to the issue of the Lebanese prisoners in Zionist jails. Lastly, we want to say that we in the Palestinian Masar Badil movement reaffirm once again our support to the resistance in Lebanon, and we consider that this resistance is the main pillar obstructing the completion of the Zionist project. We once again reaffirm our support of this valiant resistance that is still steadfast in its confrontation of this international camp for the sake of Palestine. We are aware of this fact, and continuously we reaffirm it, and today we want to reaffirm it once again. We will hear Dr. Hussein. We thank him once again for his presence with us. We know that he doesn't have a lot of time on his hands and that the situation is complicated, so we thank him for accepting our invitation. We will leave it to him, and then we will leave some time for any questions you may have. Greetings and salutations to your movement and to Palestine and to the Palestinian people, all of the Palestinian people. As you mentioned, Palestine is the main pillar of our nation, and the Palestinian cause is the central cause of the nation. We in Hezbollah and the Islamic resistance, we look to the Palestinian cause, as do all the free peoples of the world, and we see that the oppression going on in Palestine is not just limited to the Palestinian people. And today, you Arabs, Muslims, and free people of the world, you were exposed to one more proof of that. Huckabee, the American ambassador and the Zionist entity, was interviewed by Tucker Carlson a few days ago. he asked him about Great Israel, and Huckabee answered that he wishes that the Zionist entity takes over the whole of the Middle East, including Lebanon, Syria, Palestine, Jordan, and parts of Iraq, and parts of Saudi Arabia, and parts of Egypt, in accordance to the Torah province of Greater Israel, from the Nile to the Euphrates. So when we speak of the Zionist danger as well as the U.S. imperialist risk, it's a risk that threatens all of the region as well as all of the world. Proof lies in the policies of Trump as the imperialism that also even threatens Greenland and Canada and Mexico, and Venezuela and Cuba, as well as Europe. And he makes fun and ridicules European leaders as well as African leaders and so on. Therefore, we in the resistance, despite the imbalance of forces between us and the US Zionist camp, we will not capitulate in the face of these challenges, because the cost of capitulation is much worse, much more expensive than the resistance of this US Zionist project. This is why we are steadfast, resilient, and patient in the face of these challenges that our country is experiencing, as well as the region. Today, I read some condemnations of the declarations of Huckabee by the Islamic Cooperation Union, as well as the Arab League, as well as some Arab countries. But do condemnation statements, but are these condemnations enough to counter this project, the supremacist Zionist project? These condemnations are not enough. These are just ink on paper. Therefore, what's required is actual confrontation and resistance in the face of this project, which started in a new phase after the Zionist enemy started formally annexing the occupied West Bank into the entity itself, into the 1948 occupied territories. Just like Netanyahu announced that he will build a new international airport in the Naqab when the solutions or when the problems are resolved, at the expense of the Bedouins and the local inhabitants in the Naqab desert area. So he wants to gentrify the region and displace its people. This is also another project that we all should confront and resist to, not just the Palestinian people and the forces of the Palestinian resistance or the Lebanese resistance or the Arab resistance. We all have to resist this project. When it comes to the prisoners, the Lebanese prisoners, there are 20 Lebanese prisoners in the occupation prisons. 10 of them were imprisoned or incarcerated during the war between September and October and November 2024, and 10 were kidnapped in the Lebanese territories. Some used to work as fishermen, some were kidnapped in their homes, some were kidnapped while going back to their villages, and so on. There are 20 prisoners. The Zionist enemy didn't, for now, Zionist enemy didn't allow the ICRC, the International Committee of the Red Cross, to get any info on the situation of the prisoners, including some that were kidnapped while being wounded. Some of them had critical wounds, and their families and parents are worried about their situation. The Zionist entity is committing the worst atrocities and terroristic practices when, in violation of all international norms and customs and laws, they prevent or deny any access to the ICRC from visiting these prisoners and checking up on their situation. Therefore, this is inhumane and unethical and it comes in violation of international laws. We will follow up with the cause of the prisoners. We will not stop following up with it. We'll always check up with Lebanese officials and with international officials as well as international organizations, especially UN agencies and the International Committee of the Red Cross, hoping to reach a result or an outcome when it comes to the cause of the prisoners. And we know that there are thousands of Palestinian prisoners. Some were some had incredible sentences imposed upon them. Some are still under administrative detentions, and some are living in very poor medical conditions. There are thousands of prisoners and a few dozen prisoners, female prisoners, and they're all treated very inhumanely. It is the same cause and the same responsibility. The Palestinian prisoners for us are the same as the Lebanese prisoners. We thank you for your efforts and the efforts of every free person of the world in support of the Palestinian cause and support of the resistance and the support of the cause of the just cause of the prisoners. This is the summary that I wanted to start with today, and I'm ready and eager to answer any question or any remark or suggestion. Thank you, Dr. Hussein, for this intervention. In reality, there is a flood of questions that we'll try to sum up. If you want to answer on a series of questions at once, there's a question on to look at the reality of the confrontation today. After the Awliya al-Ba's battle when it comes to Lebanon, so this continuous Zionist onslaught against Lebanon and the patience, the historical patience of the resistance, how does the resistance approach this question, and what are the challenges? So, or what could we do so that we undermine the Zionist enemy? The second question is related to the administration of the resistance at Hezbollah, of the challenge, the internal challenges, as well as, especially given the fact that there are a lot of internal rivals to resistance, internal enemies to resistance, up to a point that many of these even adopt or take up the Zionist narrative when speaking of the situation in Lebanon and the resistance in Lebanon. And the reality is the same thing in Palestine as well. The third question is related to the situation of the region. Today, we are seeing U.S. military mobilizations in the region. There is a siege that is being intensified on the Islamic resistance, the Islamic Republic of Iran. What are the remarks that you can give today in regards to the conflict in the region, and especially the continuous U.S.-American war on the people, on the populations of the region? When it comes to the first question, the Awliya al-Ba's battle that started on the 17th of September 2024 and ended on 27 November 2024, around 66 days. This battle ended with an agreement that happened even though the enemy had five sets of troops active on the ground, and the resistance was dealt a heavy blow. Even despite all this, the resistance was able to impose new equations on the ground. The war didn't start on the 27th of November because Biden or Netanyahu felt guilty. The battle stopped because an equation, or like a balance of forces, was imposed by the resistance, and the Zionist enemy was not producing any results on the ground. Yesterday, Katz, the Israeli defense minister, said the Zionist entity didn't have or according to the stipulations of the agreement, didn't have the right to remain in the 5 positions. It's still occupying South Lebanon, but the U.S. administration gave them a green light, and this is clear. So the Zionist entity kept occupying these territories and uh, preventing reconstruction, and continues to attack Lebanon. And unfortunately, there are some Lebanese that adopt the Zionist narrative, and for us, we blame the Lebanese state and we hold it responsible because it says in its official political discourse that it imposed its authority and the sovereignty of the state, as well as the decision to peace or war. How could the state or government in Lebanon say that it imposed its authority in the light of the occupation and that it has the decision of war or peace under occupation, under assault, while the Zionist enemy is or continues to wage its attacks and onslaughts on a daily basis. So the Lebanese state is responsible and it has to accomplish its duties, and it is not doing it right now. The main reasons are the following. First, the Lebanese state adopts the policy of concessions, and the policy of concessions will only lead to even more concessions in the face of the enemy. They offered concessions to the Americans uh, after Zionist pressures, under the US pressure, but these concessions didn't lead to any result, to any outcome until now. Today, what's required of the state, it has to stop its concessions and consolidate national unity and prevent violations so that the Zionists and the US know that there is a national unity in Lebanon in the confrontation and the resistance of this project and the continuous occupation and the incarceration of our prisoners. This is our vision when it comes to the current phase. Now we restructured the resistance, the party, and we worked on the recovery of the resistance, and indeed the resistance recovered. When it comes to Lebanese interior, we don't have enemies, even if some consider us to be their enemies. We have some parties and groups with which we differ politically, but we don't want any enemies or tensions in Lebanon. We don't want we want Lebanon to be a united nation in the face of the assault. Unfortunately, some Lebanese adopt the narrative of the enemy and are complacent with its vision. When it comes to the region, there are big, yes, mobilizations in the region, and this is being leaked to the US through Trump statements. There are at least US calculations over what would the Iranian response amount to. This is clear, and the discourse of Rubio in Congress, and as well as American officials who point out, and the Islamic Republic also pointed out, that if it was attacked, there will be a regional war. There will be a problem in the oil supplies, and there will be a response on the Zionist entity, and a response on the nearby or the regional US military bases, as well as US ships. Of course, the Americans have calculations, but this doesn't mean that I'm ruling out an American attack on Iran, but I'm saying that it is not it's not undoubtable that it is going on in the light of the current reality. It is possible, it is likely, but it's not definitive. And if it did happen, then the Islamic Republic, with its available capacities, we will see how it will counter, how it countered it in June 2025. In the face of any assault, we wish to God that it will be able to deal it a heavy blow. Thank you, Doctor. There is a question related to the prisoners once again. Today there was a gathering or sit-in in solidarity with the prisoners at Esqua, and we participated to it. In reality, the most touching and emotional thing was the presence of the children of the prisoners mobilizing for their parents, and this consciousness found among them, including children who are just 7 or 8 years old, talking, using terminology of someone who is mature. The question on the prisoners is, lately, Zionist enemy has started to raid or sneak into some areas, and lately Atwi was kidnapped, and he's not a Hezbollah leader. He's an Islamic Jama'a Islamiyya leader, the Muslim Brotherhood in Lebanon. But the Zionist enemy has recently started doing operations, uh, raiding operations into like, ground raid operations into Lebanese territory, but we are not witnessing any response from the Lebanese state or from international organizations. The reality of the prisoners today, what are the guidelines or the advice that you can give to a large number of people attending today from multiple countries, and most of them are support or supportive of the resistance? What are the things they could do to support this cause? The Zionists, of course, ladies and gentlemen attending this conference, you know that the Zionists are incarcerating thousands of Palestinian prisoners in violation to all international laws, and some under administrative detentions, under which inmates can be incarcerated for multiple years without any charges or trials. And there are many who are sentenced to over 20 life sentences. These are all in order to remold their consciousness. Anyway, the Zionists, according to my estimates, has much more aspirations other than just incarcerating or kidnapping prisoners. Firstly, was required is steadfastness. The families of the prisoners was required of the families of the prisoners is steadfastness, and to not yield and to not feel defeated. Second, to have hope in God, and it is real hope. It's not just it is not a passive hope. It is a real, actual hope. Thirdly, hope in all the free peoples of the world, all around the world. Empires over the course of history have all disappeared, will all disappear, and there are a lot of American intellectuals who speak of this, even in the present. No empire will last forever, especially if they're oppressive, especially under oppression. But what's required from the free peoples of the world is to remain steadfast and resist and act. It's not just required of us to be patient. Yes, patience is required and determination is required, but we are also required to act. Everyone should act according to their capacities. The attendees in this conference, the free peoples of the world from participating from a lot of countries, should organize their ranks. I'm not saying that they should all join a single party. We could have hundreds and thousands of parties, but we should have common horizons and approaching the situation, including the prisoners, including the Palestinian land, Palestinian cause, and they should keep acting on this basis, because the supremacists, when they're
supremacists never feel gratified enough, and now they're aspiring to occupy Greenland, and they're also mocking European leaders like Macron or like other European leaders when it comes to when it comes to Ukraine, and the, how Trump treats all European leaders as well as African leaders as school pupils. This supremacist is not just attacking or dominating populations of the third world, but also the countries of NATO. It is not no more recognizing many international organizations, many international alliances. It has retreated, and it is retreating from the United Nations and even from NATO. He is mocking, even internally, he's mocking Pelosi. He mocked Obama and his wife. How could we accept that the leader of the biggest or the largest country in the world to post a video depicting his rival and his wife as a monkey? Where are their values? Anyway, I'm not surprised that one of these heroes of the Epstein Island, who insists that he wasn't here, while the video is there to prove it, when values when values shatter, we don't have to wonder where we're going. When the president of the largest country in the world has his name mentioned at multiple times in Epstein files, child human trafficking, assaults against children and minors, maybe even more heinous acts. I don't know, but it's very clear when values shatter, we reach this level of lawlessness. It's required of all of us when it comes to the prisoners, when it comes to Palestine, when it comes to free peoples of the world, when it comes to values and humanity, to stay patient, remain patient, and to continue acting and working and continue hoping, continue having hope. We will not fall and we will not stop. Thank you, Doctor, for the answer. There is a question on your vision of the stances of regional powers in the region today, like Egypt, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, either when it comes to the situation in Lebanon or when it comes to the situation or the assault on Palestine or Iran. The second question, the reading or analysis of the international stances, especially the stances of China and Russia. How does Hezbollah today view this regional scene or situation? When it comes to Arab and regional states, they stated clearly, especially Egypt, Turkey and Oman, Qatar and Saudi Arabia, that as well as Iraq, that they stood clearly or firmly against the assault on Iran because of its repercussions. And we think that there is another reason. It is that the events that happened lately in the region, whereas when it comes to Zionist recognizing Somaliland, when we see this recognition, it doesn't threaten Iran, it threatens Egypt and Saudi Arabia. When we see Trump saying that the United States is the one who funded and built An-Nahda Dam, in reality, it is the Zionist entity who funded it, and this represents a threat to Egypt. And then he talks about the fact that there's a problem between Egypt and Ethiopia, that he's the one who solves it, whereas he's the root of the problem in the first place. When you build a dam that threatens the national security of Egypt, what is going on in Sudan, Iran has nothing to do with what is going on in Iran. But this is also a direct threat to Egypt. And whose inciting these troubles in Sudan, it is the United Arab Emirates. It is not Iran. Therefore, maybe the
عفوا عفوا انا عندي حساسيه الربيع عذرا
I have spring allergy.
فربما هناك بدايه تشكل وعي جديد في
There might be
لدول المنطقه
we might witness the emergence of a new consciousness in the region of the threat that the Zionist entity and the United States represent and carry. Therefore, these countries mobilized maybe to convince Trump, and that's why he resorted to negotiations. I don't know. These countries or these states will be able to impact him to avoid regional war, but of course there are dangers that are revealing themselves and escalating. Most important of which, the risks to the Palestinian cause. When the Zionist entity is annexing lands and at the West Bank, what stays? What remains of even the Oslo project? Even though we are opposed to the Oslo project, what remains of the two-state solution? Palestinian Authority that is present in Ramallah today. What did they get? What remains of the two-state solution? Well, Zionist entity is occupying the Gaza Strip and it's occupying Jerusalem as well as the West Bank and fragmenting the West Bank territory through all these colonies and settlements. The two-state solution was not even implemented, and nothing remains of it. This is at the regional level. I think that all these issues will interact, especially that what Huckabee said today wasn't arbitrary. This is an American ambassador in the Zionist entity. It is not a superficial discourse or speech. When it comes to the stances from Russia or China, I think that Russia and China, there are two great powers or superpowers. They have to be aware that more US and Zionist occupations of areas or impactful areas in the world will come at their expense. And this relaxation, this detente and the confrontation to the American hegemony is futile, while the United States doesn't hide its willingnness to attack China. They should not leave these countries to their fates. I think that there's a big Russian and Chinese role when it comes to peacekeeping in the region, and there should be a more active role in the face of the challenges posed by US imperialism and Israeli Zionism. Thank you, Doctor. There's a question. You lived for a while in Europe, and you're aware of the European stances. If you can give us your opinion over Europe and the latest period, how do you interpret or analyze the European stance, especially given the fact that you pointed out the situation in Greenland, but also when it comes to the European stance? The second question, I think you already answered it, is related to the prisoners. What are the points of strength that we could use for the sake of the cause of the prisoners and the campaigns and defense or calling for the liberation of the prisoners? When it comes to Europe, if you could also answer. When it comes to Europe, unfortunately, to the exception of a few leftist and socialist figures that has a free opinion, unfortunately, there are double standards in Europe. There are double standards in Europe. Today, there is something very contradictory and weird in Europe. There is a struggle with the United States over NATO, Greenland, and the European Union, and the hegemony, dollar hegemony. President Macron wants to be freed from dollar domination. At the same time, he wants to impose hegemony over us. These are double standards. Starmer, British Prime Minister, talks of the necessity of freeing or being freed from U.S. domination, and the German Chancellor said that the United States is endangering the international system, and that we left the old global system, but we didn't reach the new global system or world order because of U.S. policy. They are causing the lack of stability. But they're also supporting unconditionally the Zionist entity and supporting the genocide in Palestine. For example, they impose sanctions over Iran under the pretext, under an illusory pretext, that Iran represses people. But the Zionist entity killed over 100,000 Palestinians and wounded over 100,000, and it is incarcerating over 10,000. But there is not even a single sanction over Israel, over the Zionist entity. When you look at the ICJ, Netanyahu was sentenced, but no one could touch him. Whereas President Putin is besieged, as well as Iranian officials, and so on and so forth. How can you justify this? This is an inferiority complex because of the German massacres against the Jews. There are also massacres against the Palestinians by the Zionists. If you sympathize with the Jewish people because Hitler committed massacres against them, why don't you sympathize with the Palestinians who are being massacred by the Zionists? It's double standards. Are some human beings more valuable than others? Are some of them first class while others are 10th class? This is hypocrisy. This is different or contradictory to everything they claim, from democracy to human rights or women's rights. When it comes to the Epstein files, what did you do? You speak of rights of children, while the whole world saw how they're assaulting children who are terrified. They're picking them. All this exploitation and so on and so forth. Today, one day I had an interview with a journalist, with a European journalist, a French journalist specifically. Journalist asked me about the French foreign policy. After 2006, I said there is no French foreign policy. You are dependent. You are dependent on France when it comes to foreign policy. They asked me about this, and I told them that you had French foreign policy at the time of de Gaulle. After de Gaulle, you didn't have any French foreign policy. Now, once again, you're thinking of how to be freed from domination because you are dependent to the United States. You know the idiom that says that there's always a bigger fish? Every oppressor strikes the smaller oppressor. At the end of the chain, they target or oppress the oppressed. This will only lead to more oppression. And every oppressor will have an even more oppressive being. Thank you, Doctor. We have a question related to so-called terror designations, especially given the fact that these designations, these notorious designations, we have a campaign against these designations, but at the same time, we see that they are being used in order to impose siege as well as more sanctions. They are being used in order to consolidate Zionist rationale at the time where we're seeing that the forces of the resistance are being designated on these lists, and we're even seeing campaigns or a series of arrests in Germany and Italy and a number of European countries. There are arrests of people, and they're being criminalized under pretext that they support the resistance. And sometimes there are even non-Palestinians and even non-Arabs.
راب
As soon as
بريطاني
some
مغني راب بريطاني
a British rap singer
وسجن معتقل
raised the Palestinian flag was arrested and incarcerated and prosecuted. This question today,
هذه واحدة من أدوات
how do you approach it? This is
التجريد
one of the tools
والمقاومين
of the supremacists and the
لتسيطر
oppressors
على المقاومة وحصارها لا
to
يمكن
impact and
هذا
besiege the resistance. It will not intimidate us.
وخافوني الله سبحانه وتعالى بيقول وخافوني ولا تخافوهم واخشوني ولا تخشوهم نحن لن نخشاهم يستطيعون
We
أن
will not fear
يفعلوا
them. They can do whatever they want
شو يعني
in their terror designations. What does
ما
it
هو
mean?
الإرهاب؟ الإرهاب
What
بالنسبة
values does it have?
للإسرائيليين
What is terrorism? Terrorism is what
الإرهاب
is
اللي
being
بيعمل
committed
إبادة
by
بحق
Zionists,
الفلسطيني
those who are genociding the Palestinian
الإرهاب
people,
اللي بيعمل إبادة بحق الهنود
those who are genociding
الفلسطينيين
those who
الإرهاب اللي
genocided the natives
استعبد
and the
الجنوب
indigenous people of America, those who enslaved
الحضارات
the
اللي قامت على
blacks
الإرهاب هي
in
الحضارات
Africa.
التي تدعي أن
The
تنتصر
civilization that was based on terror and terrorism is the one that claims civilizational superiority. This was all proved today after the genocidal war in Gaza, and the United States can no more give lectures on democracy or human rights.
الإرهاب اللي بيمنع الأساتذة في الأساتذة الجامعات وطلاب الجامعات في
Terrorism
أمريكا
is
وجامعة كولومبيا
terrorists
والجامعات
are those
الأخرى
who are
أن
banning
يقولوا رأيهم
professors
هذا
and
الإرهاب
university professors and
أو في
students and
فرنسا فرنسا
universities and the
وغيرها
University of Columbia as well as French
تدعي
universities
بالإرهاب
who are preventing and banning them from expressing their opinions or arresting
الإرهاب هو
students
عندما
and professors.
تضرب
What's the
امرأة
definition of terrorism?
وتقتلها
It's
في
when you
جامعة
strike a target a woman in the
الجامعات في
street.
أمريكا هذا الإرهاب
It's the Immigration and
الإرهاب هو
Customs
الإقامة
Enforcement Agency in the United States, not those who are fighting for the freedom of
وهذا
their
في
populations
إيده
and their
الاتحاد
land,
العالمي في إيده
but
الاتحاد
those who are
العالمي
controlling
الإرهاب اللي
international
بيخوف
system
مجلس الأمن
and security.
بيخوف منظمة الصحة العالمية وبيسكر
Terrorism is those who are intimidating UNRWA, the WHO, and
ايش
the
جريمة
United
ارتكبتها
Nations.
الأونروا
What
ومنظمة الصحة
crime did the
العالمية
UNRWA commit? What about the
شو
WHO,
الجريمة
the World Health Organization? That they are helping the
في
poor?
لا شو المجتمع الدولي اللي بيقدر يدافع عن منظمات الأمم المتحدة
What kind of international community cannot even defend the United Nations agency?
حاجة يحكون عن مجتمع دولي بقى
There is no international community anymore.
هذا نفاق
This is hypocrisy. No one takes these things seriously anymore today, especially because of US interventions. There are a lot of questions, Doctor, and a lot of remarks. There's a remark from Crystal Whippy saying that US Embassy in Fiji, and the island of Fiji, and likely elsewhere, are still having human rights sessions and workshops about democracy. In reality, this is disgusting.
بس يعملوا هيك إنه إبستين إبستين إبستين
When they do that, we remind them about Epstein over and over again. There's a question. And evaluating the operation from the glorious or blessed October 7 until this day, the resistance was dealt heavy blow. Question is on the asked to the supporters of resistance in general. Where was the axis of resistance mistaken in order to be dealt these heavy blows? Firstly, we are not fighting a small power or a small state. The Zionist entity is not just the Zionist entity
بعد
itself.
7 أكتوبر إذا
It's
بتتذكر
clear who's behind it. And after the October 7, of course, you remember,
ورئيس
there
دولة
wasn't a single prime minister, like Western prime minister or president, who didn't go to occupied Palestine,
ووزير دفاع وقائد
as well as the ministers of foreign affairs, ministers of defense, ministers of interior, and chief of armed forces from all countries, the United States, France, Italy, Germany, and NATO. They all went. It means that they were all engaged in the war. The United States put this aerial bridge, thousands of aircraft, multiple $billion granted to the Zionist entity, and hundreds, thousands of tons of bombs on the populations of Palestine and Lebanon. It's not about where they were mistaken. It's about who are you fighting against? Who are you confronting? If the Zionist entity was on its own, it would be dismantled a long time ago. Do not forget when Netanyahu went to Congress and Biden was still president, and the Democrats still had the majority. Democrats and the Republicans both stood in standing ovations to Netanyahu hundreds or tens of times in the Congress. Most of them stood tens of times. This is unprecedented in history. Who are they clapping to? To the US Zionist project. Therefore, it's not about mistakes. It's about who are you facing up with. The $100 million question is: do we resist? Do we confront? Or do we capitulate? Is it required of us, and the Palestinian people, and the Lebanese people, and the Arab populations from Lebanon, Palestine, Syria, Iraq, Jordan, Iraq, Egypt, and so on? Should we capitulate? Should we sign our capitulation? Gaza has fought for over 2 years. Over 2 years. Therefore, of course, there are mistakes committed by the axis of resistance. Of course, the axis of resistance. But of course, the axis is facing a superpower, a very big superpower, a very impactful superpower. And what's required of the axis is to stay put, to stay determined and patient and steadfast, and things will eventually change.
يبدو الصورة راحت من عندك. الحمد لله. طيب في سؤال أو ملاحظة
There's a remark
عليها.
that you can comment on.
من الحصار الأمريكي المجرم على كوبا.
Stance
يتعرض لحرب إبادة.
the criminal US siege imposed over Cuba, especially given the fact that Cuba is being genocided by the prevention of all aids and essentials from reaching the country, just like what is being imposed on the Gaza population. There's also another remark saying that there never was an international order. The resistance is the only actor trying to establish some form of international order, and that it has always been about colonial control. That's given very delusions of quote-unquote freedom. But it considers that the resistance project is the only project in the whole world that is trying to establish some sort of international order. If you want to comment on the topic of Cuba, the question of Cuba, of course, there's a project of assault against Cuba imposed or implemented by Trump and the US administration. What's required of China and Russia to provide it with what is required in order to resist, as we've spoken earlier, because the more the United States are trying to or advance in their hegemonic attempts or efforts, the worse it is for Russia and China. It does not follow their interest for the United States to enforce its monopoly on its hegemony or one unipolar domination in the world. And I give you the example of Europe, who used to be an ally of the United States, that's beginning to suffer from the repercussions of US hegemony. So what about the enemies or rivals of the United States? There's a question: what is the future of the United Security Council in the face of 3,
103 القرار اللي صدر حول غزة،
the 2803 decision
كمان
on Gaza,
موضوع ما يسمى بمجلس
and the
السلام
so-called Council or Board of Peace
بقيادة ترامب
led by Trump.
يعني إذا ممكن نتعلق على هذا.
If you can comment on this.
انا ماني شايف يعني شو بده يعمل مجلس السلام يعني مجلس
I don't
السلام
see why
سيغسل حقوق الشعب
would
الفلسطيني ولا سيغسل
would
حقوق الشعب
form
الاسرائيلي.
a board of peace.
هذا
Will
المعيار
it
الاساسي.
serve the Palestinian people or grant them their rights? This is the
عندما نتحدث عن
gold
السلام
standard.
المعيار
When he
الاساسي
talks of
للسلام او عدم
peace,
السلام
the
باعتباره
original,
حقيقه
like
اخرى
the main
هو هل
standard
سيطبق
when it comes to
هذا
peace
المجلس
is,
حقوق الشعب
will
الفلسطيني؟
this board of
هل سيكون
peace
هناك دوله
grant the
فلسطينيه؟
Palestinian people
هل
their rights?
سيكون
Will there
هناك
be a
دوله
Palestinian
فلسطينيه
state?
سيكون
Will
هناك
there be a
قانون
Palestinian
فلسطيني
government,
مشروع
a
حول
Palestinian
ارضه
people that
يحكم
has
من هناك بنفسه
the right to
ويستعيد
return to their
ارضه
land and
ويستعيد
be able
حريته
to
وكرامته
rule
ويستعيد
itself and take
مجلس
back its
السلام
land
يحكم
and its
بهذا
prisoners
الشكل
and its
ولا لا؟
dignity?
حيكون
Will the
مجلس
Board of
السلام
Peace
هو
realize this? Or will the
الحقوق
Board of
ما لا
Peace
تستطيع اسرائيل ان تحققه سيقوم به مجلس السلام؟
implement what the
هذا السؤال
science
الاساسي.
entity wasn't able to implement? This is the
وعندنا
main question
شعارات
to ask.
وخطابات وريفيرا وما ريفيرا
It's
يعني
a board of slogans
فلسطين
and
ما بده ريفيرا
speeches and
فلسطين ما
illusory
بده
promises. Palestinian people doesn't want a Riviera, it wants its land back.
دكتور سمعتك قبل فترة كنت علقت
Doctor, I heard you
على
a while back
سياسات الأونروا تجاه
talking about the UNRWA policies towards
الفلسطينيين
Palestinians in Lebanon.
يعني
The attempt to
بعض
اسم
erase
فلسطين وخط
Palestinian
تحرير
symbols,
فلسطين.
the name of Palestine and the map of
كثير من
Palestine and the history of Palestine.
وكالة دولية
UNRWA, at the end of the day,
تنفذ أجندة دولية صح
is
إنه
an
بتعرف
international
الشعب
agency
الفلسطيني
implementing an international
لكن
agenda,
بتوصل
even though
رسالة
it did,
الإعلام إلى
in
الصحافة
fact,
إلى الصحة
help the Palestinian people
إلى
on
العمل إلى
many
كل شيء
domains, from
لكن
health
هذه
to
لما تتخذ هاي
education
الخطوات
to
معناتها
work and
إنه أنت
employment.
عم تنفذ
But
أجندة العدوان
when it
والاحتلال
implements these measures,
وتنظيم
it is
الحرب ضد
enacting
فلسطين
the agenda of
وقصف الأرض
assaults, aggression, and occupation. Palestine will remain Palestine, and the
أي
land will
مدينة
remain
بأردن فلسطين ستبقى
to its
اسمها
owners, and any
وين ما
Palestinian
تغير
city
اسمه ستبقى حيفا هي
will
حيفا
remain.
ويافا هي يافا
Haifa will remain Haifa,
والقدس
Yafa
هي
will remain
القدس
Yafa, Al-Quds will remain
ولد هي
Al-Quds,
اللد ولن تكون
Al-Lid
تل
will remain Al-Lid, and it will never be Tel Aviv.
لكن دكتور البعض بيقول أيضا إنه
Doctor, some
الوضع
say
الحالي
as well
بالفلسطيني في
that the
لبنان
reality of the
صعب
Palestinian people in
جدا
Lebanon is
حالة
difficult
الفقر
when it comes to
ضيق
the
منع
poverty, the
العمل
security
إلى
measures,
آخره ويجري حديث دائما
the
باستمرار
ban from
إنه
working.
هذه الإشكالات ستحل ولكن حقيقة الأمر
Are these
يعني أنا
are these problems
بكون
going to be resolved?
ببيروت
And I am here
وبحكم
present in
خدماتي
Beirut, and I'm seeing the
حالة ضيق
reality of the
مهول
Palestinian
على
camps.
المخيمات.
There is
هذه
predation
الأمور
and
يعني
security measures
كيف
imposed on
ممكن
the
أن تناقش
camps.
في مجلس النواب
Why
لمجلس
is this
عشرات
not
الوزراء
المرات
discussed in the
وتمثل
parliament?
النظام الدولة العميقة في
It
لبنان
was discussed
ليست
multiple
مؤازرة لحقوق
times,
الشعب
but
الفلسطيني.
unfortunately, the deep state in Lebanon is not in support, is not supportive of the Palestinian rights,
شكرا على
very
رأيك
clearly.
لكن في نفس الوقت كيف ممكن
But
أن
at the same
نعزز
time,
صمود
how
شعبي
can we
اللبناني
consolidate the
إعطائهم
steadfastness of our people in Lebanon
الحقوق
by granting them
التي يحتاجها
the rights that the people
ليستمروا
need
صامدا.
for it
لا
to
يستطيع
remain
السلام بالكلام
steadfast? It
والشعارات
cannot remain steadfast through slogans and illusory promises and empty speeches and anthems.
في سؤال دكتور حول
There is a
يعني
question
وحدة وتماسك معسكر المقاومة في المنطقة.
on the unity
بقول
of
إنه
the
يعني
resistance
استمرار
camp in the
معسكر
region.
المقاومة يمكن لازم
Some say that the idea of the axis of resistance should be expanded
لا تكون
further,
فقط يعني
and it
مقتصرة على
should not be limited
جهات.
to
هناك بعد شعبي هناك
few
بعد
actors. There's also a popular dimension and
معسكر
another dimension
ما
of
هو
the camp
تقييمك
of
اليوم
the
لمدى
axis.
تماسك
What's your
وحدة
evaluation
معسكر
today to the unity, the
معسكر المقاومة
unity level of
بالفعل
the axis?
أصيب بضربات نتيجة
The axis is united
2001
and
لكن
consolidated. It
اليوم
was dealt some blows because of
المقاومة
the
نفس الرؤية نفس
unequal balance of powers, but it has the same vision, it has the same
السياسات
objectives,
أو
the same
متقاربة
policies or similar
جيدة
policies,
لكن
and
هناك
complementary
مشكلة
policies.
أساسية اليوم
But
والتي
the
لا
main
يجوز
problem today
تسويتنا ولا يجوز تسقيطنا هي
should not
اختلاف موازين القوى. موازين
make
القوى
us fall
ليست
or lose
أبدية
the unequal
محتملة
balance of
موازين
forces.
القوى
But
ممكن
this
أن
is not
تتغير
something that is definitive. It could be changed in the future.
الحقيقة إنه يعني
In
لا
reality,
نريد أن نطيل عليك ونجهدك
we
أكثر
don't
من
want it to be
اللازم.
too long.
في كثير من الملاحظات تحيي
Many
المقاومة
remarks.
بتقول إحنا
الله
مع
يحفظك.
المقاومة في فلسطين في
A
لبنان
lot
في
of
اليمن
remarks
في العراق
greeting the resistance
بدل
in
من
Lebanon and Yemen and Iraq and
نشد على
Iran.
إيدين المقاومة.
It's a question that could be answered quickly in the light of the conditions that we live under. Could the Palestinians in Lebanon be naturalized?
بالنسبة لي الشعب الفلسطيني شعب شقيق.
For me, the Palestinian people is a fraternal population. It's a very dear population.
من عدم تجنيس الفلسطينيين ليس عنصري.
I'm based not on racist preoccupations for me, for my rejection on to the naturalization of Palestinians. It's not out of racist reasons. It's out of support of the cause. We should have solutions. We don't want Palestinian. We want to preserve Palestinian identity, but we should find a middle ground for it, for the Palestinians not to lose their national identity, but to be able to live in dignity. What is the message you can send to solidarity movements and movements of solidarity with Palestine and the resistance? What is the message, according to you, that should be sent out? Because parts of our organization, not because the resistance doesn't have the capacity to translate its sense, but this is part of the challenge. Is there a letter that could be addressed to these countries and movements? Your voice is loud. Make it louder. Make it louder. Your actions are appreciated and impactful. Make it even more intense. Coordinate more. Cooperate more. Amplify your voices more. We need your impact and your voices and your presence. The contrary, we see that one voice, even one voice, adds value. Therefore, every voice counts. Every voice counts and could lead to major changes. So don't underestimate any opinion or any role or any person. On the contrary, we should be even more active. Blessed are your efforts. Those you have the honor to be on the side of justice and righteousness. And we are honored by your presence and your actions and your participation and opinion and actions. Thank you, Dr. Hussein. Reality. I'd like to stay with you for long, but there are some fast questions, quick questions. For example, there's a question: do you consider that the marginalization of leftist resistance forces was a mistake? If there was marginalization, this is of course rejected and this was mistaken. And if it did happen, it should be corrected. The left is part of the movement of the free peoples of the world and movement of liberty and freedom. It is part of the resistance in Lebanon and Palestine and the whole region. The left is different from ideologically from Islamic forces, but have a lot of common points when it comes to the national question and resistance. Therefore, the ideological differences should not impact and cooperation on humanitarian and resistance basis at all. We thank you, Doctor. We remind our dear guests that next week and the one after it, we will continue with this series. Our next guest will be the member of the political bureau of the Islamic Jihad, Palestinian Islamic Jihad movement, Sheikh Ali Abu Shaheen, and then the Secretary General of the Popular Democratic Party, Muhammad Hashisho. Thank you once again. Thank you, Doctor, for your efforts and for your time. And of course, this conference will leave a lot of room for debates and discussions.
شاء الله. شكرا جزيلا
الله
لك.
يخليك.
Thank you very much.
يسعدك ويخليك.
الله يسلمك.
تحياتنا للجميع وتصبحون على
Greetings to
خير.
everyone and good night.